The 2025 NFL season is officially here. So in today's video, I want to do my week 1 predictions for the 2025 NFL season. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. And we are going to begin with the Thursday night football game, the Dallas Cowboys versus the Philadelphia Eagles. So there's a lot of things going on with the Dallas Cowboys right now. Will Micah Parsons be on the team? Will he not? For Philadelphia, they have a lot of new faces on the roster, but I think for the most part, Philadelphia is feeling pretty good heading into this game. Dallas is the clear underdog here, but I do think Dallas could give Philadelphia a bit of their run for their money. And that is because I do think Dallas has the receivers in CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, and Dak Prescott has had success versus Philadelphia in the past. I ultimately do have Philadelphia winning this game, and that's just because I believe a lot more in their defense than I do with the Dallas Cowboys defense. Plus, I do think Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith can really get after Dak Prescott, and I just don't think the Dallas Cowboys have the ground game to really affect this Eagles defense. So I think for the most part, Dallas can maintain a competitive game here for most of the game, but I think at some point late in the game, the Eagles get a double-digit lead and find a way to cruise to a victory. I have the Philadelphia Eagles winning 31-20. Next up, we're going to Brazil to see the LA Chargers go up against the Kansas City Chiefs. We just saw the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champions, win their game. Can Kansas City, the team that lost the Super Bowl, can they now win their first game? We're going to Brazil, so there's going to be a lot of conversations here about the location. Both of these teams, obviously, there really is no home team here. I would imagine there's probably going to be more Kansas City fans there just because they have the more recognizable name at this point. But it's not really a home crowd for either team. We saw last year Philly versus Green Bay be a really fun game, and I think this Brazil game will also be very entertaining too. When it comes to the actual matchup here, it's quite interesting. So I think that both teams have some question marks with the offensive line. Obviously the Chargers just lost Rashawn Slater. They're going to be moving around their offensive line. And I think for Kansas City, you got some new starters at that left tackle and left guard spot. That's going to make for an interesting little combination there. You got Mahomes, you got Herbert. Last year, the Chargers were able to maintain pace with the Chiefs, but they were not able to really ever have too much success against them. They were just able to have some very competitive games. And that's kind of what I'm expecting here. I think Kansas City does win this game, but I do think the Chargers are able to stay in this game for most of it. I just think when it comes down to it in the fourth quarter, who do I trust more, Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes? I'm obviously taking Patrick Mahomes. I think the Chargers could give the Chiefs a legit run for their money. I think the defense can hold up, but I do have the Kansas City Chiefs winning this game. I have the final score 21-17. Then we move over to our morning Sunday games between the Indianapolis Colts and the Miami Dolphins. These are two head coaches that are on the hot seat. Shane Steichen has a quarterback controversy with Anthony Richardson now on the bench, and myself and a lot of Colts fans pretty ticked off about it. And you got the Miami Dolphins, who are just getting worse every single year, it feels like, and their head coach is also on the hot seat. I definitely do think Tua is the better quarterback than Daniel Jones, but I think the Colts have a better overall roster than the Miami Dolphins. We have two offensive-minded head coaches here, and I think you're going to see some pretty fun football in this game. But ultimately, I think it's a pretty close game. I honestly do believe this is a bit of a coin toss type of game, a 50-50 matchup, and based off the odds, it seems like nobody really knows who's going to win this one. Miami has the offensive firepower, but I think the Indianapolis Colts made enough upgrades on the defense, especially in the secondary, to maintain a hold of Tyreek and Jalen Waddle for the most part. If they can just hold Miami down and not necessarily give up those explosive plays, then I think Indianapolis will have a huge advantage here. Whereas I think for Miami, if you can get some huge chunk plays, either running the football or passing the football, it could really open up this offense for Miami. And when it comes to the Colts offense, I think they're going to have a field day passing the football. And no, it's not because Daniel Jones is a good quarterback. It's just that Miami has probably the worst secondary, if not maybe besides the Packers, one of the worst secondaries out there. Minkah Fitzpatrick helps, but your cornerback group is just completely depleted at this point. And when you look at Indianapolis, you have a Michael Pittman, a Josh Downs, an Alec Pierce, even Adonai Mitchell out there. Not to mention Tyler Warren as well. So I just think Indianapolis and their receivers are going to have a lot of success getting open. I think they'll be able to run the football somewhat effectively. So I'm going to go with the Colts here in a very tight, close game. I have the final score 21 Indianapolis, 20 for the Miami Dolphins. But again, it could go either way. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New York Jets. We have, of course, Aaron Rodgers going to New York now with the Jets right there. New quarterbacks for both these teams. Rodgers now goes to Pittsburgh. The Jets have Justin Fields. I think both these teams are quite interesting and honestly going to be some fun watches this year. For Pittsburgh, they're clearly the better roster with, in my opinion, by far the better defense at this stage. But within New York, there's a lot of talented pieces that can still go and keep this team really competitive. If Justin Fields, who ironically played for Pittsburgh as well, I just kind of remembered that. If Justin Fields has a good day and can run the football effectively, I think the Jets could legitimately give the Steelers a genuine run here. But I think that Steelers defense is just so loaded with talent that they're going to be able to really stranglehold this Jets offense. The Jets just do not have the weapons on the outside. They have Garrett Wilson, they have Mason Taylor, but outside of that, I don't really trust none of those guys. And yes, they have some really good running backs and a nice young offensive line that I think can get the task done, but I just think that the Steelers have the guys opposite of them to hold them up. So unless the Jets can just find some success running the football, I have a really hard time seeing this Jets offense consistently moving the ball down the field, especially when they do have a quarterback in Justin Fields that hasn't really proven to be an excellent passer of the football nor processor of the field. So I could see a world where the Jets are kind of struggling to move the ball offensively, and I think you're going to see guys like TJ Watt have a lot of success against some younger offensive tackles. And I think it's going to make it really hard for the Jets to really move the football. Now, when it comes to Pittsburgh, look, I don't think Pittsburgh necessarily has a potent offense either, but I think they have enough talent to get a couple more points than the Jets. So I'm going to ultimately go with the Pittsburgh Steelers winning a defensive shootout here. I have the final score 17 Pittsburgh, 14 for the Jets. Moving forward, we have the Carolina Panthers versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, two of probably the worst defenses in the NFL. I mean, if they're not the two worst, they're definitely up there for sure. I think the Jaguars have some talent defensively, especially along their defensive line, but I don't really love what else they have on that roster. I think their linebackers are just okay, and I think the secondary is very suspect. Not to mention, it seems like Travis Hunter is going to be more full-time on offense, which, me personally, I actually think that's a little bit questionable. I actually think they need him more on defense than on offense, if I'm just being real with you. But, you know, offensive-minded head coach, they also want to get their quarterback going, so I kind of understand it. For Carolina, you know, they just don't have the dogs out there. They have the guys now up front to stuff the run a little bit better and maybe occasionally get after the quarterback. And, you know, J.C. Horn is there too. Trevon Mulrig will help out as well, but I still think the Carolina defense has a long way to go. And I think Jacksonville, with the new offensive head coach, Trevor Lawrence now in year number 4 or 5 now, BTJ, Travis Hunter, I think they're going to have the weapons on the outside to really give Carolina some issues. So I'm expecting a bit of a higher scoring game. This is another one of those matchups where there's a lot of pressure on both these teams, especially both the quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence just got paid. He wants to prove why they paid him. Bryce Young is now into his 3rd year. He's had a lot of ups and downs in his career. He wants to carry over that late season 2024 success. So both these quarterbacks really need to have nice days, and I think for the most part both these teams will have nice days. I just think the defense will ultimately hold both the teams back. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars winning this one because I just trust Liam Cohen and all those weapons within the Jaguars offense a little bit more than I do with Carolina and their pieces. Again, I don't think either defense is necessarily going to be able to get a lot of stops, but I do trust Jacksonville's defense a little bit more than Carolina's, and I think maybe some turnovers could also help Jacksonville win this one too. I have Jacksonville winning 33-24. Moving over to the Arizona Cardinals versus the New Orleans Saints. Now, I want to make something very clear. I do not know who the starting quarterback for New Orleans is going to be as of when I'm recording this. I'm recording this on Tuesday. This will be uploaded on Thursday. So for all I know, Shock or Rattler will be announced as the starter. I don't know the answer to that right now, though. My assumption is that Shock will be it, but regardless of who starts at quarterback, I don't think it really impacts my answer. I think Arizona's going to win this game. I think they have a ton of talent on both sides of the football. I think the secondary for New Orleans is really going to be tasked with handling all of the weapons in Arizona with Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. I think this would be a really good opportunity for Kyler and Marv to start the season on the right foot. I think Marv gets going here. I think Marv probably ends up with 80 plus receiving yards with multiple catches, maybe even a touchdown. I think McBride gets going, and I think I want to see Kyler get going too. The Cardinals don't have the greatest offensive line, but the Saints don't have the greatest defensive line, and they have a ton of questions as well to answer just kind of all around the roster. And on the offensive end, I just don't think the Saints are going to be able to score a ton of points because I don't trust any of their quarterbacks, neither Rattler or Shock. And when I look at the Cardinals defense, they improved the defensive line. They should be a lot better stuffing the run and protecting and getting after the quarterback. In terms of secondary, there's a couple questions there, but I like what I've seen from Will Johnson so far. They have a Buda Baker. I just think they're going to really be able to handle business on the defensive end versus the Saints offense that I just don't think is really going to be able to score a lot of points. So because of that, I have the Saints winning this one, and I think they win in kind of dominant fashion. I have the final score 27-10. Moving over to an NFC East shootout here between the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders. I think there's going to be a lot of people that think Washington is just going to absolutely smoke the New York Giants. And honestly, it could happen. But I gotta be honest with you, I think the Giants have a genuine shot of winning this game. Now, I am going to predict the Commanders to win, spoiler alert, but I think the Giants are actually going to be in this game from start to finish. My one concern for New York is just, look, Russell Wilson, I love him, but I think there's a clear ceiling with him as a quarterback, and that ceiling is just an average to slightly below average offense. And with the Giants not having the greatest offensive line and not really being able to establish a dominant ground game, they're going to be really relying on Malik Neighbors, and I think you're going to see Washington take that personally by putting Marshawn Lattimore pretty consistently on Neighbors, and we'll see if those two probably go one-on-one. I don't necessarily think the Giants have the greatest offensive line, but I also don't think the Commanders have the greatest defense. I think an X factor of this game could be Frankie Louvu doing some linebacker blitzes and really getting in Russell Wilson's face. Yes, I'm also assuming Russell will be the starter. That hasn't been announced yet, but I think it's pretty obvious he will be. If Dart starts, then that's going to make this game a lot more interesting, but I think it's pretty positive that it will be Russell Wilson. Now, on the opposite end, I think Jaden Daniels will have a good day, but I could imagine this offense for Washington starting maybe a little bit slow. They did just pay Terry McLaurin, who hasn't been practicing with the team for a few weeks now, so there's going to be some little slow starts, I would imagine, because the two haven't really been able to build that chemistry, though I'm not expecting it to be a massive issue because they were so great last year. I think Jaden has a good day, but I think this Giants defense can hold the Commanders to just field goals instead of touchdowns, and I think that could keep this Giants offense to maintain pace here. With that said, I think this will be a field goal game where you're still going to see a lot of yards, but not a lot of touchdowns. I think the Commanders win, but I think it's a field goal game here where the Giants are really close. Maybe they get the ball late to win or tie the game, but they just can't get the job done because their starting quarterback is Russell Wilson. I'm going to go with the Washington Commanders to win a game. Kind of a low scoring game, but when it comes down to field goals, I have the final score 18-12. Moving on, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Atlanta Falcons. So something to note with this game, a handful of quarterbacks did not play in the preseason. We're talking about a lot of veterans, but one name who popped up there that is not a veteran but did not play was Michael Penix Jr. And that tells me that this Falcons team is feeling pretty confident about their quarterback. Last year, the Atlanta Falcons did have success versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And even though I do think the Buccaneers are the better team than the Atlanta Falcons, I think the Falcons might have this game in the bag. Now, Tampa Bay is dealing with a couple injuries, especially along their offense. Tristan Wirfs will not be playing. Chris Godwin doesn't look like he'll go. I think Mike Evans is banged up, but don't quote me on that one. Whereas for Atlanta, they're heading into this game for the most part pretty healthy. They have the weapons like Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan. I think those guys will have a lot of success in this game because while I like this Buccaneers defense, I think they're missing a few pieces, especially in the linebackers. And when it comes down to who can exploit not the greatest linebacker play, I think it would be a team like Atlanta that can run the football over and over again and really dink and dime their way down the field. I also think Penix gives this offense a bit of a higher ceiling. And when you talk about the new improvements to the pass rush of Atlanta with two dudes who can come off the edge at 100 miles per hour to get after the quarterback, with no Tristan Wirfs there, I could see James Pierce or Jalen Walker having a fairly nice day out there. So I actually am going to go with the Atlanta Falcons. I think Baker Mayfield is an awesome quarterback, and I do, by the way, think the Buccaneers will win their division, but I'm going to go with them losing to Atlanta here in this week 1 matchup. But I think later in the season, maybe Tampa Bay gets their revenge to split the season series. I have the Falcons winning 28-24. Moving over to an AFC North fight between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. Look, when you talk about the worst defense in the NFL, you got to have the conversation about the Cincinnati Bengals. Their defense has not been looking good in preseason and was not good last year, and it's looking very questionable. However, in this week 1 matchup, you're going up against the Cleveland Browns, who might have the worst offense in the entire NFL next year. The Browns have like one really good receiver in Judy, a good tight end in Njoku, some questions at running back, an offensive line that should be better from what it was last year, but is also a little bit older. But more specifically, a quarterback in Joe Flacco that I have very little faith in. And the Browns defense, I just don't think is good enough to really slow down Cincinnati that much. I think this will be a close game, but I don't necessarily think it's ever really going to be in doubt. I think the Bengals will win this game, but I could see a world where the Browns just kind of stay in this game. Maybe they're within 10 for most of the game or within a touchdown, but are just never able to really mount a drive to ever seriously have this game in jeopardy. I think Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins have a field day out there, as they do basically every single game. I think the offense scores a lot of points. I think the Bengals defense gives up some points, but is able to just get enough stops on the field. By the way, they did just pay Trey Hendrickson a 1-year deal, by the way, and I think Trey Hendrickson silly to sign that contract. I don't really understand why he did that. I would have just held out, but it is what it is. You have Shamar, you have Trey. I think they get enough pressure on Joe to ultimately allow the Bengals to win this one. I have the final score 34-27. I do think, though, it's like a late score. It's 34-20 for most of the game, and then the Browns score to make it a bit closer, but ultimately the Bengals do win the game. And lastly, our final 12 o'clock game between the Las Vegas Raiders and the New England Patriots. The Patriots have been the talk of the town the entire offseason, and I think a lot of people are seriously underrating the Las Vegas Raiders here. Now, Las Vegas does not have a good defense. I don't think their defense is good at all, but I don't think the Patriots have the offense yet this early in the season to really exploit the issues of the Raiders defense. The Raiders have like one great player on the defense and a lot of other question marks there on the defensive side, but I think Max Crosby could really change the game here. Max is going to be going up a lot against the rookie Will Campbell, and I hate to say it, but I think Will could really struggle versus Max just because Max is so long, lengthy, and athletic, and versus Will Campbell, who has the a little bit shorter arms, and well, I think he's a good player, and I think he will have some success. I could see Max Crosby just kind of giving the rookie welcome to the NFL moments. I think it's going to be kind of similar here to what I was talking about with Washington, where I think the Patriots actually have more success moving the football, but I think they struggle when they get into the red zone for whatever reason. I think the Patriots will have like a couple drives where they're marching down the field, big chunk plays. But when it gets to that red zone, they just kind of struggle. And my reasoning for it is because I think that is when Max Crosby comes into play. And I think because there's so many new faces on this Patriots offense, you're going to see some chemistry issues, which typically start to mount up when you get towards that red zone where things are really tight. All of a sudden, it's a lot harder to find the windows. And I think you see Drake May, holding on to the football, taking some sacks, trying to make some tight window throws when guys aren't really ready for it. I think as the year does go on, you'll see those issues sort of be fixed, but I think early in the year, you could see a team like the Las Vegas Raiders take advantage of it. Now, I do like this Patriots defense. I think this Patriots defense could find some success versus this Raiders offense, which, by the way, Raiders offense has a Jacoby Myers situation now, as he, I think, just requested a trade because he wants a contract extension. They did bring in Amari Cooper, but I don't think Amari Cooper is good enough to replace Jacoby Myers. I'm going to make the assumption that Myers is on the Raiders for week 1. It would be kind of shocking if he wasn't. You add in an Ashton Genty, you add in a Brock Bowers, who I think are just incredible players. Brock is tight end 1 for me, and I think Genty will be an awesome running back this year. I think the Raiders have a good enough offensive line. I have the Raiders winning here as maybe one of my upsets of the week. I think the Patriots probably outgained them, and they'll look back at this game and say, we probably should have won, but I think the veteranship of Geno Smith allows them to score a bit more points, more touchdowns, whereas the youth of the Patriots show up a little bit here. I have the Raiders winning 21-18. But all right, now we enter into our afternoon game, starting off with the Seattle Seahawks versus the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners are entering this season with a lot of questions to answer here. Questions with the age of the offensive line. Can they stay healthy? Questions scattered throughout the receiving core. Christian McCaffrey, what does McCaffrey look like? Does Brock Purdy live up to the contract? And defensively, a lot of new faces are on this team with some new defensive linemen, some new secondary members, a new linebacker. I mean, a lot of questions are going to be having to be answered from San Francisco. Whereas for Seattle, there are some questions too, but a lot more continuity on the defensive end. You plug in a piece like a DeMarcus Lawrence, a Nicky Monwari as well. Then on the offensive end, you have some question marks, but I'm a big fan of who they hired in Clint Kubiak. You add in a Sam Darnold. JSN, I think, will have a breakout year. You add a Cooper Kupp. Your offensive line looks healthy and ready to go. I love what I've seen from them in the preseason so far. They look really sharp and really ready. And we saw last year Sam Darnold, now on the Vikings at that point, but he had success versus that Niners defense last year. I think the Niners will be a better team this year than what they were last year, but I think the Seattle Seahawks are just the better roster at this stage. So I have the Seahawks kind of getting maybe a bit of an upset win here versus San Francisco. It's also a game that is being played in Seattle well too. So I have the Seattle Seahawks winning this one 22-17. Next up, we got the Tennessee Titans versus the Denver Broncos. I will keep this one quick and fairly easy because I think we all know who's going to win this one. The Denver Broncos, who do have a second-year quarterback, so there could be, you know, some sophomore slump tendencies here. I think this is a pretty easy matchup for Denver. I don't really see any advantage here for Tennessee. I think the Broncos have the better defense. I think they have the better offensive line. I think they have the better weapons. I think they have the better quarterback. Cam Ward, I think, may find some success here and there, but I think the pass rush for Denver gets home consistently. I think they force some turnovers. And as long as Bo Nix just has an average day out there, which I think he will, I think he'll have a fine day because that Tennessee Titans defense does not really scare me. I think the Denver Broncos win this one fairly handily. I had the final score 28-14. I think it'll be 28-7 for most of the game, and then a late score from Cam Ward gives Titans fans a little bit of hope, but ultimately I will go with the Broncos to win this one. But these last 4 games are absolute bangers. Let's start off with the Detroit Lions versus the Green Bay Packers. So the Detroit Lions were the better team last year, but in this offseason, a new OC and a new DC and a starting center change. A lot of, new faces are now in the building, like a DJ Reed. Whereas for Green Bay, it's for the most part the same roster, but the secondary is kind of depleted at this point. Matthew Golden now adds to that receiving core, and you're hoping for that defensive line to show up next year for Green Bay. I think this will be a really close game, but ultimately for me, I think the big X factor is what does this passing game for Detroit look like early into this game versus a Green Bay secondary that I have a hard time buying into. Now, I do buy into the safeties of Green Bay. They have 2 really good safeties in McKinney and Evan, but I just worry a lot about the outside corners. Can they realistically slow down an Amon-Ra St. Brown? Can they slow down a Jameson, Jahmyr Gibbs in the receiving game too, Sam Laporta? And the answer to it right now for me is just probably no. But I do think because these teams are just so good offensively, I think you're going to see Josh Jacobs have a big day. If Jordan Love can limit the turnovers, I think he'll have a nice day too. I think this game ultimately does come down to, honestly, which team has more turnovers, and I tend to believe Green Bay will have more turnovers than the Detroit Lions. I think the Lions do have some questions defensively to answer, especially along, what does Aiden Hutchinson look like early into the season coming off a broken leg? And then, which other pass rusher can get after the quarterback? However, I think the Detroit Lions have a ton of talent in the secondary and their linebackers and the interior defensive line. And I think offensively speaking, they can really take advantage of that Green Bay secondary. So when it comes down to it, despite all the new faces in Detroit, I do think the Detroit Lions win this one. Granted, I do think it'll be a very close game. I have the final score 30 Detroit, 26 Green Bay. If you guys want an extended version of my predictions, I have a podcast called First and 10 where I am also going to be doing longer form videos for my predictions. I'll have it linked in the description below as well as in the pinned comment. Make sure you guys check it out. We're going to be uploading predictions every single week. Moving over to the next big bang here, we have the Texans versus the LA Rams. Now, the LA Rams are coming into this game with a bit of a question mark at the quarterback position. And no, it's not because Matthew Stafford sucks. It's because Matthew Stafford has been banged up and hasn't been able to build the chemistry and connection with the new face in Devontae Adams and, rebuilding the chemistry with Puka Nacua. I think the Houston Texans will find success offensively, but they have to find a way to block that Rams front seven. If they can block Jared Verse and all those guys up front and just hold on, allow CJ Stroud to have a nice day out there, I think it could make things a little bit easier for Houston because I don't necessarily think that Rams secondary is particularly special. And when you look at all the weapons in the Houston Texans building, Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, all those guys, there's a lot of weapons there that I think could take advantage of a Rams secondary that I think has some questions to answer. I think for Houston, there's a lot of pressure to get going early because of how the offense kind of sputtered late last year. New offensive coordinator, I think he wants to start off on the right foot, keep the offensive line safe, have some guys helping out, some tight ends chipping, some running backs staying in protection. Protect your young quarterback in CJ Stroud. Now, I do know that Joe Mixon is going to miss this game, but I'm not too concerned about it because I think this Texans team will be pretty, pass heavy early on. But you do have Nick Chubb there too. So I think Nick Chubb can get the task done. On the opposite end, I do worry a little bit about this Rams offense, at least early on. Now, I'm going to predict the Texans to win here, but I do think as the season progresses, the Rams will become the better team at some point. I think early on, both these teams are pretty evenly matched, especially when you talk talk about the Rams not having their quarterback in the building, or not, I guess not in the building, but, actually on the field the past couple weeks. He has been kind of getting going lately, so I think there could be a little bit of some rust there. I think as the year progresses, the Rams will get healthier and will get better, and by the end of the season, they'll probably be a 12, 13 win team. Whereas for Houston, I think they'll be really good too. But I think early on, Houston finds the Rams in a bit of a vulnerable spot here, and I think they take advantage. I also think turnovers could play a big role with this one too, and I think Stroud will be able to hold the football a little bit better, not throw as many interceptions, whereas I could see Stafford throwing 1 or 2 picks to a Houston secondary that is going to be very opportunistic, and if they can get 1 or 2 picks, I think that allows Houston to win this one. I have the Houston Texans winning frankly a coin toss game here. I have the final score 30-27. And then we get to our Sunday night football game, and you want to talk about a coin toss, you want to talk about a banger. We have the Baltimore Ravens versus the Buffalo Bills. Now again, this is a coin toss of a coin toss game. I don't know who's going to win this one. I think you have probably your 2 AFC favorites right here in Baltimore, who is my personal number 1 team in the entire NFL, going up against the Buffalo Bills, who are also within my top 5. Now, I think Baltimore has some advantages versus Buffalo, but I also think Buffalo has some advantages versus Baltimore. Obviously, last year, we did see the Baltimore Ravens lose to the Bills in the playoffs, but we also saw the Bills lose to the Baltimore Ravens as well. So they're kind of heading into this game with, I guess, an evenness, I suppose. But I do think the Baltimore Ravens, because I think they're kind of the betting favorite here, I think there is some question marks, about them going over to Buffalo, and can they actually get the task done? So I think there's more pressure on Baltimore, but there's also a lot of pressure on Buffalo too. It's not like they don't have any pressure. Buffalo has some new faces on the defensive line that I think can get after Lamar Jackson, but I just don't know if it's going to be enough. I think the Ravens will be able to run the football effectively. I think it's going to come down to which team can get more stops when it comes down to it. I trust this Ravens defense a little bit more so than the Buffalo Bills. Now, I will say I do trust this Bills offense to score a crap ton of points and make this thing extremely close. I'm going to predict the Ravens here. I'm going to play it a little bit safe because I do think the Ravens are the better team. But if the Bills can stuff the run against Derrick Henry, which is a very hard task, but if they can, I think the Bills probably win this game. I think the Ravens will be able to run the football effectively, hold the ball a little bit more, and maybe win the time of possession battle, maybe have a little bit less turnovers. I think they play just a little bit more clean football. Whereas for Buffalo, you're playing at home, you're so hyped, you're so excited, then you throw an interception, and then next thing you know, Baltimore scores, and I think it allows Baltimore to win. I have a coin toss game here. I have the Ravens winning 37-34, but really, it's hard to really analyze this game. It's just, pick your team and pray you're right. And then finally, to end this week off, we have the NFC North Monday Night Football game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. If you've watched my videos throughout the offseason about the Chicago Bears, I do expect the Bears to have some early season struggles as they're kind of building some continuity and some chemistry with their new offensive-minded head coach in Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson's system requires a quarterback who's a bit of a robot out there, somebody who's not going to be too flashy or make too many mistakes. And right now, I just don't know if Caleb's quite yet ready for that. We've heard some offseason reports about him really struggling in the offseason training camps, but then in the preseason, he looked pretty darn good in that one game he played. Now, Minnesota on the defensive side, I think they have the pieces to absolutely go, but I do kind of worry about the secondary for Minnesota versus all the weapons within Chicago. I also think the Bears now have the offensive line to slow down this Vikings pass rush, which could make things even more interesting. We're also talking about JJ McCarthy going up against the Chicago Bears defense, which is also a bit of a tough task. But ultimately, I do think the Minnesota Vikings just have a really complete roster that really only has one question, and that is at the quarterback position. I think JJ will not turn the ball over. I think he'll play very safe football, a lot of dumping off to, the flats. Probably not very many tight window throws unless it's to Justin Jefferson. They're going to run the football a lot. Even though I do think this Bears defense can find success, I do not think they're going to be able to find many turnovers, and I think that will ultimately allow the Minnesota Vikings to win this game. I think, again, you will see some early, maybe not struggles, but an incomplete pass that should not have been incomplete, a missed throw because of some missed timing. I think there will be some issues with this Bears offense early on, but as the year progresses, it does get better. I have the Vikings winning a really close game here. I have the final score 24-20 in favor of the Minnesota Vikings. So here are my picks for week 1 of the NFL season. I will be tracking my record throughout the season, and you guys can let me know in the comment section below, who do you guys think are going to win in week 1? And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.